something happened when I sneezed. I'm going to start the paragraph ahead. Looks like it's going to be 2 parts again. In January of 2010, she wrote to Mikovits and was amazed at the lengthy emails Mikovits wrote in response to her questions, as well as her openness and inclusiveness. As their relationship grew, Dekoff-Jones took over the role of answering much of Mikovits' email questions from patients. It was Dekoff-Jones' opinion that Mikovits was spending so much time responding to patient emails that it was limiting what she could accomplish in a day as a scientific work. Remember that Dekoff-Jones was the one who had hepatitis B while she was pregnant. Dekoff-Jones eventually came on as the clinical director of the WPI. Her relationship with the Whitmores quickly soured. Wonder why. Dekoff-Jones believed the problems arose because of Annette's inability to admit that what she didn't know and protect her staff. Eventually, Harvey took over as the person at the WPI to whom Dekoff-Jones directly reported. She found Harvey to be a smart man and generally easy to work with, but he had his breaking point. In a text she sent to Harvey, she used the word nepotism to describe many highly placed individuals who worked at the WPI, like Carly West-Kinn, legal counsel for the WPI, Kellen Monick-Jones, the patient coordinator for the WPI, both Whitmore's nieces. Other examples included not just relatives, but others who had long-standing personal or professional ties with the Whitmores. Oh, they don't do that. They don't, they don't hire on children and friends, do they? Yeah. Kind of like mafia. Now you've really lit my fuse, Harvey wrote back in a text after that nepotism comment. Shortly after that, Annette Whitmore informed Dekoff-Jones they were going to have to shelf their plans for a clinic and her services would not be needed. They had had conflicts over other issues as well, such as whether the clinic should treat kids with autism. Dekoff-Jones wanted to treat them, but believed Annette saw far too many problems with such an effort. And remember, Annette had a child that was vaccine damaged with autism. Annette. Shame on you. For Dekoff-Jones, Mikovits' story is important in that Mikovits was like Pandora opening the forbidden box. She made mistakes like everybody in the story. Everybody. An incredible opportunity has been lost as a result. But it's mostly Harvey and Annette's fault. Judy never had a chance. They never supported her. She didn't have what she needed to pull it off, ever. It was a joke. Around 2 a.m. the day after her arrest. Now we're back to the arrest. Mikovits was driven to the Todd Roof facility located in a lemon orchard about 10 miles out of the city of Ventura. Upon being admitted to the facility, she was again required to strip bend over, submit to being cavity searched for drugs. Where'd she get them from? Mikovits was given several pieces of paper with directions on how to be a model prisoner, but because she didn't have her reading glasses, she couldn't make out the words. No comprendo, señor. When she complained to a guard about her need for reading glasses, the guard replied, "This isn't a resort. That's why they call it a jail." He apparently yelled back at her, "No comprendo." Apparently, a model prisoner didn't need to read. At one point during her processing, Mikovits was asked if she was suicidal. "No," she replied. Even with her clear answer, Mikovits was placed in the suicide watch wing. That would make me suspicious, because now I would be thinking they're going to Arkanside me. The suicide watch wing was regularly used for people who were being arrested for the first time. It seemed that being arrested and placed in jail for the first time was such an overwhelming experience for the average person that it was presumed to make them suicidal. The light in the suicide watch cell was on the entire night, which allowed the guards to constantly monitor the prisoners for any signs of abnormal behavior. Mikovits' cellmate was a woman, Marie, pseudonym again, who was undergoing treatment for a methamphetamine addiction. Because Marie was taking several powerful drugs to break her addiction and was thus at risk of falling out of bed, Mikovits was required to take the top bunk. The cell was made of thick cinder block. The cell was about 4 feet wide, had a bottom and a top bunk made of steel, a commode and a sink attached to the wall, and a small window at the top. Instead of bars across the front entrance, there was a thick steel door with a small rectangular window. When the steel door closed, sealing her in, Mikovits felt as if she were in a tomb. The opening and closing of the heavy doors all night sent shivers through Mikovits. She could never have imagined herself in such a place. For a mattress, they were given the equivalent of an exercise mat, and no pillow since they were in the suicide watch cell. Oh, great. Marie explained to Mikovits how to put her foot on one side of the small sink to climb into the top bunk. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Good gravy. Upon making it up to the upper bunk, Mikovits was greeted by the fluorescent oblong light, which never went off. Yay! Let's sleep right next to that. Mikovits thought about one particular day in the WPI, shortly after she had returned from the Invest in ME conference, or the Chronic Fatigue Syndrome conference in England, in May of 2011, when Harvey had stormed into her office. He shouted at her because he thought she had insulted Annette's efforts to reach out to another chronic fatigue syndrome charity. Mikovits had done nothing of the sort, but Harvey demanded, "You're going to go and apologize to Annette." Okay, Mikovits replied, hoping to defuse the situation. Harvey's booming voice had no doubt been overheard by other staff members, but as they left Mikovits' office, he put on a big smile and slid his arm around her shoulder, but his hand didn't reach all the way to her shoulder, stopping instead at the back of her neck, where it would be concealed by her shoulder-length blonde hair. As he walked past employees of UNR, all smiles and friendliness, Mikovits felt his hand squeezing the back of her neck so hard she thought it would leave bruises. It's kind of like he was leading her, directing her, pushing her. To Mikovits, the message was unmistakable. She felt like he was saying he could end her at any time he wanted. All of these people he supported wouldn't raise a voice in protest. Harvey pulled the same little neck squeeze trick on Mikovits in August of 2011 when they'd been leaving a restaurant with a representative of a drug company that Mikovits had introduced to the Whitmores. Harvey was hoping the company would initiate a clinical trial of a new drug therapy with the WPI and provide significant financing. Mikovits had been unusually quiet during the evening, and by the end of the meal, the company had decided not to collaborate. Since that time, Mikovits had been plagued by a recurring nightmare in which she was driving with friends of hers, having a great time, laughing and talking, when Harvey Whitmore suddenly sat up in the back seat, reached his long arm around her neck, and started strangling her. The metaphor was clear. He could do anything to her, and she could not scream. That first night in jail, Mikovits didn't worry about her own safety. She believed that Harvey's plan had been to get her back to Reno, and she knew the notebooks containing evidence had been secured by Max. Who knew what was planned for her in Nevada? But no matter how long his arms, Mikovits doubted Harvey could reach all the way from Reno, Nevada, to her jail cell in Ventura, California. It was ironic, but she felt safer in a cell with a recovering methamphetamine addict than she had felt in months. Mikovits let her thoughts wander to Dr. John Coffin, whom many saw as the grand old man of virology, and his quote in Science comparing her to Joan of Arc. Science at the highest levels is a territorial game of power. In many cases, if a young person discovers a novel finding in someone else's turf, the self-appointed head of that domain writes the second paper and first review article and effectively squeezes the young person out. Coffin had actually written an editorial in support of her original article in the journal Science entitled "A New Virus for Old Diseases." Now he was on the other side. Who, Mikovits wondered, compared a fellow researcher to Joan of Arc, a 14th century warrior, saint, unjustly accused of heresy, and prophesied, "The scientist will burn her at the stake." It was a ludicrous statement. Why should a scientist be burnt at the stake for publishing data that might turn out to be wrong. In the 1970s, many papers were published falsely claiming the discovery of human disease-causing retroviruses. None of these people were burnt at the stake. Some of them were elected to the National Academy. Was Coffin comparing the scientific community to the agents of the Inquisition? How might they feel about such a comparison? If her research turned out to be incorrect, let somebody else run the same experiments and disprove her. That was the way science went. People can be right one day and wrong the next. She could accept that Coffin had been wrong about human retroviruses. Had he ended up in jail? Disgraced? No. There was so much more to this story, but as much as she thought Coffin had acted inappropriately in many instances, she also felt that a great many of her problems stemmed from her former allies, the Whitmores. She believed that the recession had badly hurt the Whitmores' real estate holdings, but also wondered if others with far more power might be forcing them to act against their natural inclinations. But why would anybody not be interested in helping the millions of patients with ME or chronic fatigue syndrome and children with autism? Even with all that had happened, as Mikovits lay in her bunk back to the jail cell, she found herself trying to pray for the Whitmores. Mikovits had genuinely liked them. Many of her friends believed her downfall was due to her misplaced loyalty towards the Whitmores, maybe an emotional naivety, an inability to tell when people were manipulating her. But there was no doubt that since the 1984-1985 outbreak of ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, at Lake Tahoe, no other individual or group had done more to focus attention on this horrible disease than the WPI. The poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow once wrote, If we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each man's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility. It was in this vein that Mikovits thought of the Whitmores as she sat in her jail cell. That was very generous of her. Mikovits believed Annette was in over her head with the WPI, but she was a parent fighting for her child's life. She felt that so many things had conspired against them, but especially the economy, and not fully understanding how much the government wanted to avoid taking an honest look at ME or chronic fatigue syndrome or autism, and the role vaccines might play. Mikovits tried to leave these thoughts behind and concentrate on something more elevated. She struggled to remember the words of certain biblical verses she had heard over the years at church, but couldn't recall any. It bothered her because she really needed to pray. Only the words to the Lord's Prayer came to her. She began reciting it over and over, almost like a mantra, and it gave her a feeling of great peace as she faced the uncertain night ahead. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Then the priest says, Deliver us from every evil, and grant us peace in our days. In your mercy, keep us free from sin, and protect us from all anxiety as we wait in joyful hope for the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory. That's how Catholics say it. Act and God will act, Joan of Arc had once said. Despite all the times she had acted before, it had come to nothing. Mikovits thought she would try once again. And with that, we are definitely at Chapter 1. Chapter 1. So, that's all the farther we're going to go today, because I've already got this on 2 videos.